There are many wicked problems and grand challenges to consider in the food system, but as a learner, we challenge you to think about which are most important. Which do we focus on first? How do we measure and evaluate to determine priorities for sustainable food systems? What is of greatest priority, and how does our focus influence other aspects of the food system?
Many groups are at odds because they have different end goals in the food system, right? Which end goals are the most important?
Whichever one you have, right? So if you ask all those participants with different goals, there will be the group that says, well, water quality is all that matters because, or food safety is all that matters, or animal welfare is all that matters, or energy independence is all that matters, or equity and access to calories is all that matters, or on and on, right? So we can think about it from a single final consumer perspective, or if you backed up and said for all the people participating, how does that work to, within the constructs of the policies and rules and regulations and economic markets and property rights and tradability and so on, what's a way of organizing that production system? I don't think there's an easy answer to which one is either most important or biggest or best. Again, I'm a Midwest farm kid, and so I think very much my starting point tends to be in producing safe, cheap, and widely available food. And if that means a production system someone doesn't favor, but it produces a lot more food for less money, then we have other ways of kind of mediating those conflicts. Pay more, pay less for something. Locally sourced, for example, might be a goal for somebody else. In certain cases, that also is compatible with cheapest. Sometimes it's compatible with best, know my attributes, but sometimes it's not. So when you want a really cheap can of tomato paste, if the tomatoes had to be grown within 20 miles of where you're consuming it, it's not going to be the cheapest can, right? So and quite often putting the question in context of something that's not quite as personally relevant to the person you're talking to helps sort out those issues. So it's not a very good answer, but I don't think there's an easy answer.
There isn't an easy answer.
For most important and interesting questions, there are no easy answers.
I think one of the biggest risks in our food system currently is the disconnect between what people understand about the food system and the reality of the food system.
Okay.
So we have so many people now that have misconceptions about where their food comes from, and they're making decisions based on that, which is creating more pressures on the system instead of alleviating pressures on the system.
So what are some of those key misconceptions that people are making decisions about?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of marketing around buzzwords. So sustainability being one of those buzzwords. And often the marketing around sustainability doesn't match the science around sustainability. So the places in the system, for example, where food waste are happening are often very early in that supply chain. And the efforts are often very late in the supply chain. So we're not giving the same amount of resources to alleviating the food waste in all of the spaces where we can make a large impact. So that's one example that I think many students can relate to. So there is a lot of food waste at the consumer end, but there's also a lot of challenges with harvest and transport and storage and processing, and we have losses in all of those spaces of the supply chain. And if we alleviated all of the food waste that's all the way at the consumer level, we would still have significant food waste in the rest of the food chain.
With so many challenges in the food system to consider, where do we begin?
So at one point in time, you used to teach an issues in the food system course, yes. What were some of the major issues that you covered?
I would say I could break down the issues into areas of the environment. So how does animal production interact with the environment, impact the environment? Issues with animal welfare. That's generally where consumers come into play, is that they're concerned about animal welfare. And then issues with policy. And a lot of our students don't really think about that too much, but that's an area that I think is very important. We have a lot of technology in the U.S. What is the best way to help other countries, to help developing nations? Do we try to help them develop animal industries that mimic what we have here? Or do we try to take our technology and apply that to their individual and unique situations, given their own environments and biodiversity, the kind of wildlife they have, the amount of resources they have available? And I don't think anybody has perfect answers to those questions. It's challenging. Policy is very challenging, I find. It's interesting, but it's like a lot of other areas. Too many times I think we see people get involved in policy that don't have a good background in that discipline. And that does worry me, because then we end up with things that aren't in the best interests of animals or people.
Our wealth of the life is not sacrificing future generation. We shouldn't do that, right? And in our generation was very happy. It was very, I think in current generation is really, I think ones that are very happy, especially my generation. We didn't have a hunger, we never problem with any kind of supply. We have plenty of it. Now, I think I also talked about the Pandora's box. When we opened the Pandora's box, we did not realize what's going to come out. I think petroleum could be the Pandora's box, one of the example. And it was a lot of useful use of the pen, but we did not know what the consequences coming from the pen. Sure. That's why I'm talking about that.
A great question that often is asked is, what about GMOs and non-GMOs and Roundup and non-Roundup and water quality and other things. This very complicated thing where we care intensely about one aspect of the food system still has to be broadened out into the entire question before you know which side of the issue you probably are going to land on.
In this module, we learned that the range and scale of wicked problems and grand challenges within the food system is far-ranging and far-reaching. We learned that challenges across generations and around the globe impact the food system and influence decision-making and policies around food production and food access. Finally, we learned that the food system is highly complex and that we're all interconnected to the food system in some way.